Good morning, everyone. I would like to call to order the Finance and Audit Committee meeting for HART. If you can all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. The first item on the agenda is the election of the chair and vice chair, and I have word that we are awaiting one confirmed member of the committee, Commissioner White, and so to give him the opportunity to be here for the nominations, I'm going to go ahead and ask if we can, or go ahead and move that agenda item down later into the agenda after some of the other events. So we'll just bring that back up once he gets here. So we'll now move to the approval of the minutes, agenda item 2. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those in favor, or all those opposed, nay. Okay. The ayes carry. Next is public comment on agenda items. We have 3 minutes per speaker. Do we have anyone signed up to speak? We do not. Would any member of the public at this time like to come and speak on specific agenda items? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you very much. We will move on to a presentation, and I will turn it over to Mr. Seward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer for HART. This morning, we're going to give you a financial snapshot based on some questions that the board had at our January 3rd meeting, specifically about our cash flow and how it works at HART, and then a discussion on our fund balance policy, our historic fund balances, and some of those drivers of why the fund balances are the way that they are presented today. So first, our cash flow management. At the January 3rd board meeting, we touched very briefly on the fact that HART has two specific accounts as far as our banking process is concerned. We have a Florida Prime investment portfolio, which many public agencies in the state of Florida use, counties, cities, special districts, where the surplus, and I don't use surplus as extra money, but just the bulk of their savings, if they don't have other investment instruments, have their primary accounts at Florida Prime in investment portfolios, small yields. We report that out to the board each month in the financial report. The last couple of years, we've added that segment on Florida Prime to show you, one, the amount that's in there, and two, what our yields are and the distributions of those accounts across multiple investments. The best part of having the bulk of our money there is it's easily accessible to be able to move to our second account. And we have a Bank of America, what we call a concentration account. And we typically have an operating account where we keep around a little between $2.2 and $2.5 million to be able to be used for payroll. So we transfer money out of our Florida Prime every couple of weeks. And then we also have a zero balance account where our accounts payable are paid through the account, so it's always swept out and kept at a zero balance. So again, we have two primary accounts, the Florida Prime, and that's really, when you look at the amounts of our fund balance or the amount that we really have in the bank, that's primarily the largest component of it, with some exceptions. And as I go through talking about our cash flow, I'll identify what those exceptions are. When it comes to our cash flow, and our organization is unique in the public realm, meaning we have a very succinct revenue stream, and without the ability to really expand that revenue stream. So as an example, working at a county government has multiple revenue streams. They have multiple investment portfolio accounts, and they also have multiple concentration accounts. So they have the ability to move money around rapidly to cover expenses. We resemble more of a small business where we are very much reliant on cash coming in to cover expenditures going out without a lot of wiggle room, based on the fact that we have a lot of reimbursable grants as our revenue source. So as an example, I wanted to show you in our adopted operating revenues, we have the formula grant, which is 17%. That's the 5307 federal formula. 17% of our revenues are coming from that source, and state and local grants are 9%. In every case, those are reimbursable grants, meaning we have to expend the money, which is HART money in the bank, and then request money coming back or reimbursement for those expenditures in what we hope is a timely manner. So again, this example, spend cash in bank first, reimburse later. So we set up our processes to try to get that reimbursement as quickly as possible. And I say that, and I'll come back to that when we get to our actual examples of cash flow in our historic graphics in a second. So this is what our cash flow looked like last year. This is FY16. And what you'll see, we peak cash in the bank around December. And we peak in December due to the fact that taxes are due in the November timeframe, and they get processed and we get our ad valorem checks. So we typically get our ad valorem transfers from the tax collector in starting right before Thanksgiving, and it runs all the way through right at the beginning of the calendar year. And that's when we receive the bulk of our ad valorem revenues coming in. So as the year goes on, obviously we spend money, and that cash flow starts to decrease and decrease and decrease. What I want to show you is, and this came up at the January 3rd board meeting, and I wanted to actually correct my answer or clarify it a little bit better. In the August timeframe, in the prime account, we did have around just under $700,000. However, that was all the cash we had in that account. We had moved a lot of money from prime over to our concentration account due to the fact that we were still awaiting 5307 reimbursement. And I'll get to that too in a second of exactly why we were waiting. So we were waiting for around $11 million of reimbursement for 5307 funding at that time. So we were right around $5 million total cash. Most of that, again, was in BOA in our concentration account to be ready to be nimble enough to be able to have money in for payroll, accounts payable, waiting for that reimbursement. If you look historically, it's the same trend. We peak in December, and obviously that peak in December is higher each year based on the fact that ad valorem revenue and property values are increasing. Last year was an anomaly as far as the $5 million mark in July and August. However, if we had had the $11 million of 5307 funding when we should have had it coming back into the bank, we would have been up at the mark right around the $15 million, $16 million mark, which is right in line with what we typically see as far as our cash flow management through the years since 2012. So why were we waiting, and why were we in that situation? A couple of things. And again, I touched on some of this in just high level on the third meeting. It was sort of a perfect storm of issues. One, the federal government brought their system down, their information system that we process reimbursements through. They brought that down for an upgrade and a move to a new system. There was a specific timetable set up for all FTA-funded agencies to get their documentation turned in a timely manner to meet those deadlines. We did not. That was perfect storm issue number 2. We had a couple of personnel issues that resulted in us not getting our documentation in a timely manner to meet the deadline of when they opened. When they reopened, we very much moved forward in a fastidious fashion to get our reimbursements. At that time, it was also year end for FTA. So along with getting the reimbursements that we needed to be able to fill the gap and get us to year end, FTA was also in the process of year end and halting some of the processes that we needed to. However, we have a very good relationship with our FTA region. We were able to make a couple phone calls. We worked hand in hand with them. They prioritized ours, and we were able to get that money in the bank prior to the close of the fiscal year, making us whole at that time. So what did we learn from that? Well, we learned, one, that don't count on the federal government timelines when it comes to information systems management is number one. Number two is we have built controls and processes in place. So we have a process where it's very fast to get the reimbursements turned around and back to us. Not only for the federal side, but the state side as well. So we'll make sure that in the future, we process our reimbursements at a much quicker rate than we have in the past. Also, some organizational structure changes where grants management clearly understands the importance of that function on our cash flow management. So those have been put into place, controls have changed. We feel very comfortable of where we're going as far as our cash management process is concerned. So that moves us to the fund balance conversation, as they do intertwine. Obviously, I mentioned in the very beginning of the conversation where we're unique in that we have one succinct stream of revenues and expenditures going out without a lot of wiggle room or a lot of fluff in there to be able to absorb some of those gaps. So what we typically have at the end of each year is something called a fund balance, which is really, the definition of it is cash and cash equivalents. It's money that's left at the end of the year. So typically that gets reported out in our comprehensive annual financial report, which our auditors, Clifton Larson Allen, or whoever has a contract at that time, comes forward to the board and talks through our financials or findings, if there are any, and where we are as far as our cash management is concerned. So where are we right now with that process? And I bring this up as the numbers I'm about to show you are unaudited, and I just want to make it clear where we are in that process. The year-end financial audit is underway. It's been underway since the end of the year. It is on schedule. Our FRS liability, which is the state of Florida, if you remember last year, the state of Florida now requires us to book that liability. It isn't a true expenditure, meaning cash out the door, but it does hit the bottom line as far as a liability is concerned. As of the typing of this presentation, we did not have our FRS. Over the weekend, I learned that Clifton Larson Allen does indeed have our FRS, and we've actually booked that liability unaudited for next year at about $1.8 million of the expense. Not will be different, yes. So we'll bring that forward with the audit as well to discuss with you. Our OPEB liability, that's required now, and that's something that auditors will come back to. The goal is for Clifton Larson Allen to come to the March board or March committee, April board meeting to review the CAFR with you. And during that conversation, we will talk about fund balance. Last year, the fund balance conversation was the primary focus of Clifton Larson Allen, wanting to talk about the fact that our fund balance has decreased over the last couple of years. I'm going to get to exactly where we feel we're going to be now and what those drivers are. So again, fund balance. Fund balance is cash and cash equivalents that are left at the end of the year, that are remaining, sort of like your savings account. It's typically described, we call it cash in the bank. There are other governmental entities that call fund balance other things, but our fund balance is our cash in the bank. Organizations, governmental organizations, typically have a fund balance policy or a reserve policy. It typically tells the organization what is expected to have set aside for specific functions throughout the year. They can be set aside for economic downturn. They can be set aside for emergencies or natural disasters. And it's usually codified within some type of board policy or statute or some type of mechanism. HART in our board policies does have a budget reserve policy, 960.10, specifically about fund balance and a reserve policy. We had modified this policy 4 years ago and brought it to the board, and the board approved it. So this is what, and forgive me, I criticize some of my staff for reading directly from the slide, but I think it's important in this case to clearly articulate on record what this states. HART will maintain at a minimum a reserve of 90 days of operating expenditures. Now I'm going to stop there. There is no governmental statute or regulation on how much or how many days a government has to set aside. There are only recommendations, specifically from the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, best practices. As an example, our counter agency across the Bay has a 2-month reserve policy. We have a 3-month reserve policy, or 90-day reserve policy. So I'll continue. To be used to ensure the maintenance of services to the public during non-routine and unforeseen disaster situations such as hurricanes and other weather-related events, as well as other natural or man-made disasters that cause disruptions in public services as declared appropriate by the HART Board of Directors. Also, this reserve of 90 days of operating expenditures is to be used to, 1, mitigate any delays, reductions, or lower recalculations in the Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 formula funding that would affect HART's ability to maintain positive cash flow for operations. 2, use for unanticipated expenditures of a non-recurring nature. And 3, to meet unexpected immediate increases in service delivery costs. So it isn't a coincidence that those specific items are in there based on the fact that we had to use some of our fund balance over the last 2 years. They were built in there specifically for the reason we had to use fund balance. 4 years ago, when we modified this and brought it back to the board for discussion, it was evident at that time that our cash flow, if we ever had a delay in our 5307 funding, or the initial 5307 funding calculation was somehow lowered through the year, we needed the ability to spend that money, or the reserve and money in the bank, cash in the bank, to be able to offset that, awaiting, not in lieu of, but awaiting the actual reimbursement to come back. 2, we also saw, going into a self-insured mode for our health insurance, that was an unknown for this organization, something that we had not done before. So not having a primary expenditure for personnel costs, when personnel costs are one of our highest burden rates, it was important to be able to have access in case the expenditures in that specific area or any other area increased over time. We would need to be able to dip into that instead of cutting service or cutting other costs. So I simply highlighted these areas to show that we had some forethought years ago that based on our cash flow, things like this could happen, and they absolutely did happen. So we're very happy that this policy was in place, that we had that ability to have that funding and to be able to draw from it when we needed it and replace it with that funding once we got it. So at the January 3rd meeting, there was a question or a request to show historic fund balance. And what this graphic shows, a couple of things. One, what our ending fund balance is at the end of that fiscal year. And that's typically when the fund balance is actually calculated based on the expenditures at the end of the calendar year or end of the fiscal year. So in the first column, you'll see entitled Ending Fund Balance. That is the amount of cash in the bank at the end of that fiscal year. The 90-day reserve would be the required amount of 90 days of reserve based on what that fund balance was at the end of that fiscal year. And then just a few notes of what we were doing during that time that were drivers or an impact on actually what we could put in the bank or had to draw from the bank at the time. So in FY 2012, we had $21.3 million ending fund balance. First full year of being self-insured. That sort of kicks off something that we'll talk about as the months come along as far as our healthcare expenditures are concerned. FY13, we grew to 22.4, and then FY14, and I won't continue, but in FY15, we started to lower the amount of fund balance available. FY16 was 10.5. Recall during last year's CAFR discussion, we had a serious discussion of exactly why that occurred and what those drivers were, which that year was primarily our healthcare costs were increasing. In FY17, we do not have an amount yet. It is still, we just got our FRS over the weekend. That's going to impact where we're at as far as our ending fund balance. But I will tell you, based on the fact that we drew out for higher expenditures, which I will get to in the next slide, our fund balance, as we sit right now, we had to draw into that 90-day reserve to be able to balance the books at the end of the year. So why exactly was that the case? And again, these are unaudited. When Clifton Larsala comes back in the spring to discuss the CAFR with you, these will be audited, and they may be changed. They may be up, they may be down. This is pretty close to where we feel we're going to be. A couple of issues that drove the use of fund balance outside of the 5307 issue, but increases in expenditures for last year. One was we under-collected. We had a net under-collection of revenue in FY 2016. The largest driver of that was fare revenue. And I know there was an article in the paper over the weekend, at least that's when I saw it, concerning our ridership with PSTA and HART and overall ridership trends in transit. So we are looking at what we are predicting and projecting for ridership for the FY18 budget and see if there's any tweaks what we need to do as far as the FY17 budget is concerned. But fares and passes, other income, ad valorem, state grants, we all under-collected in revenue primarily due to the ridership issue. Expenditures. So, coupled with a decrease in revenue collection, we over-expended our budget by $4.7 million, primarily because of salaries, wages, and fringes, overtime, and our fringes, again, in healthcare durables. Parts, we overspent in parts by $700,000. I can say with confidence that for years our parts and inventories were not budgeted correctly. They weren't budgeted strategically. I can tell you that in the FY17 budget that the board adopted in September, we made amends to that parts line. So we should be very close to coming in or on budget during the FY17 budget for parts. So we did learn and we changed what we needed to do for that. Our insurance, our liability insurance increased. Our utilities, the increase where utilities increase is actually a net. Based on some of our sustainability initiatives, we're reducing overall electrical consumption across the board. But as we get more and more CNG buses on site, our compressors are running more, and they run off of electricity. So we're going to have to look and balance that out over the next couple of budget years. So when we look at what was needed based on these expenditures, we accessed that reserve or that cash in the bank to be able to meet those needs to balance going into FY17.
And this is our toggle over. So Mr. Seward will still be available for questions. We wanted to take a little time to put this in the context of conversations that staff has been having, and you've been highlighting in the context of what's going on with transit, what's going on with our zero-based budget. As Jeff noted, there is a story in the Times about HART and PSTA ridership. And as we like to say, the universe of transit that we serve ended in 2014. So up through 2014, we had very strong ridership increases. We were putting out small increases in service and getting very strong increases in ridership. That has changed. It's lower gas prices, more options out there. Our demographics are moving and shifting around. Our market has moved. And you've heard me make the comment before that driver's license attainment is at the lowest levels in 40 years. Vehicle miles traveled is still going up. So there's a lot going on in the market. And this is a year that your transit agency is deciding that not waiting for this model to maybe come back, it's time to get out in front of that. So our universe of how our services are being used is different. And the universe of how our services are structured internally is different too. We clearly have healthcare, we have liability. When we are an entity where half our budget is salaries, we are always going to be exposed to personnel costs more strongly. And what can we do to mitigate that? Because the goal clearly is that the service we have on the street is sustainable. That a single mother who moves to Plant for schools and works in Brandon does not have to choose between changing her school or losing her vesting toward retirement. That the service she has is reliable, it's not fickle, it goes out with good forethought. So this year you are seeing us talk about a zero-based budget. You are seeing us talk about overhauling our service with the TDP update, which is also our operations analysis, and coming back to you with new tools. And let's remember, your agency has been at the forefront of new tools, and we are very successful at being beyond the bus. We've had great return on our taxi voucher program last year that helped us essentially cap the growth on paratransit, where we had been seeing an 8% growth previously. Hyperlink is now in 3 zones and doing extremely well. The Brandon zone by itself is accounting for a chunk of our ridership, and it's off to a really strong start. We're talking to our friends at the county, about what can go on in South Shore to be flexible with our services, removing big buses where they don't make sense and coming in with cost-effective solutions. So as we continue to go beyond the bus, we'll take the zero-based budgeting process and move it over to a success-focused budget. Last year in September, there was a lot of discussions at the board meeting about KPIs, and there was a strong sense coming back from our board that the innovative things, the cool things, the big difference things were not captured in the KPIs, and that is correct. So this year's process of having a success-based budget will be coming to the board in levels of workshops and engagement. So you are defining success, you are setting the outcomes, and your staff is balancing, as we have noted on our slide, taxpayer accountability with customer expectations. We could be 100% on time, but if it's cost prohibitive and folks don't like the service, that's not good accountability. We could go miles and miles and miles without breakdowns, but again, if it's not meeting our customers' needs and it's not accountable to our taxpayers, that's not worth it either. So we'll continue to balance our taxpayer accountability with our customer expectations leading to our outcomes. So what will you see in the next 6 months? You will see more information at the finance meetings. You will see some level of workshops or facilitated discussions. So we have your guidance and your feedback on exactly what this new universe looks like. We will be talking about goals and KPIs because if we truly are a new organization and a new service model, the old goals are not going to measure this and the old KPIs are not going to be relevant. So what does success look like? Build that plan tied to the financials that we have now. Get in front of these cost drivers so we know we are handling this and providing a sustainable future, and rolling out the door with a new successful model of what transit looks like. So it's going to be a busy year for all of us. We will be on the phone with you and meeting with you an awful lot. But we're ready for it. I think we're excited. And, internally we talk about how many of us get the opportunity to remake our entire business. This is it. This is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment, and we're looking forward to the challenge. So with that, any questions? And I will turn it back over actually to our committee chair. Yes, sir.
Sure. Jeff, did you have anything else on the slideshow that you're good?
I have a question if I can.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Director.
Hey, Jeff, first off, great briefing. I actually have a couple questions and maybe just one statement. In your briefing on cash flow, your grant funding in there roughly makes up, we're looking at $19 million. What is the turnaround time for reimbursements? Can you give me a rough wag? Is it 4 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 8 weeks?
Yeah, typically a week.
A week. How fast does the money come back to you, though, is what I'm getting at.
Within that time frame.
Within a week. Okay, that's rather good then. Very good. And then the other one is just an overall statement. As I looked at your balance sheet there, and I'm referring to the overall and unaudited expenses exceeding budget, I think we have to be a little concerned that personnel are making up more than 70% of the unbalanced portion of that, roughly $3.2 to $3.4 million of the $4.7 million. So hopefully we'll discuss that in the future too, and why.
Yes, sir, and I believe that at one point last year in the budget cycle, we brought back numbers comparing the portion of HART's budget that went into personnel versus other transit agencies. Until we get to autonomy, and nicely we're at the forefront of that, the biggest costs are going to be the person driving the bus and the person repairing the bus. We will go ahead and refresh that data and get it back out to you in a weekly.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Director DeRoche. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Director DeRoche.
I just had, first off, bravo. Wonderful. I thought this was a very good explanation. And just the comment that I would make as far as what we're showing in our monthly board packets, maybe what we need to do is to show both fund balances, or maybe retool how we depict that information, because I think what I saw and interpreted was a little bit different than what the actual or state of play was. So it would be maybe helpful to just look at that, and maybe that can be something of future discussion. But I wanted to go back and kind of understand a couple more of the numbers here. And first off is in the slide where it's titled Fund Balance Management, and we're comparing our ending fund with our 90-day reserve. What goes into that 90-day reserve? Are we looking at a 3-month of our budget, or is it of our current actuals, or
Expenditures.
it is expenditures?
It is expenditures.
To date, or
Yeah, it's by year end.
by year end?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a couple of different things that we can do, or we do. One, going into the year, knowing what our budgeted expenditures are, because obviously we don't know where we're going to end up.
Right.
So what we typically have is an idea of this is what our fund balance needs to be. So as an example, in FY17, knowing we had $72 million worth of expenditures, 90 days equates to about 17.9. So as the KPI that we have to add money to fund balance, that would be the number that we would use to add that to. So at the end of the year, when we book expenditures, we have another number, particularly since we overspent. So expenditures went up, and there'll be a new number that should have been attained. The only problem one of the problems based on what you saw with the cash flow is for us to have a full 90 days of reserves sitting in the bank. We would have to put $5 million a year into fund balance for the next 3 years without overrunning or under collecting or expanding. Mm-hmm. So some time ago, one of the initial lofty goals I had when Mr. Hale hired me was I would love to see us get to a $50 million fund balance in the next 10 years. Well, reality set in, and it's just not attainable based on what we provide. The money that comes in, HART puts in service. That's where the money goes. We invest in our community. I mean, there are other governmental agencies and organizations that have huge fund balances, but aren't putting a lot of new service on the street.
Right. Yeah, you have that balance where you don't want to take out too much and not put it back in. So the 16.773 for million for FY16 was based on what our projected expenses were going to be, the 68 million for the year. 60, was that, I think, what our budget was? Okay. Question. And I was here when we did the policy change for the 90 days, and I believe, yes, 4 years ago I was here. What if we had it at 60 days? Would we have gone into the red then, or?
It would have been close. But I don't, if we had 60 days, we would meet 60 days. It's that extra 30 days. And even based now on information that I'm getting from last week on where we think we're going to end up with the CAFR, that may not be the case. We may still be under.
But it would be very, very close.
Yeah, very, very close.
Okay. So, well, I commend the foresight, because given that we can't really rely on the reimbursements. It's the formula fund, right? Is the one that came in late, yeah, and that's obviously a big chunk of our reserve budget. Another question I had: it seems like when we used to do our reporting, as we put in a budget amendment over the year, we would actually make that change in the budget. This year, and I think last year. For example, at some point, maybe 3 or 4 months in, we might realize, hey, we're not going to, our fare collection is down. We're probably not going to put $1.5 million back into reserves. Do we ever, or is it practice to go back and maybe amend that budget so that we make that change, so that maybe, we come in closer to what our budget is, or, the budget is a little bit more, let's say, of a living document?
I'll answer it 2 ways.
Okay.
One, yes, it's typical of government entities to do that. Mm-hmm. For us, specifically, if you recall, when we went back and we brought forward the ATU contract for approval by the board. We had said at that time that we weren't comfortable amending the budget. We wanted to see at least what the first or second quarter of this fiscal year was going to look like prior to making a decision of whether or not we needed to amend. So we're still under that philosophy of let's wait until we made it through the first quarter. Let's make it through the second, particularly since the ATU contract really hit us at the end of that first quarter. Let's see what we're really performing. And if it looks like we are going to have to come back and amend, we will do so.
Okay. Because, then when we go into the slide where it says that we missed our revenue mark by $586,000, wouldn't that really be closer to $2.1 million if you factor in the reserve fund? Because we were anticipating an extra 1.5 in revenue. If we zeroed out the fund balance, then our loss of revenue,
You could, yes.
more accurately, would be 2.1 million. Okay, because that's something maybe I would like to, if we do it maybe every quarter, kind of have a realistic look. Are we still going to be able to put money back into reserves? Maybe make a budget amendment as far as what our projected reserve is going to be. And then the other point that I wanted to make, I know in the past I've seen year-end data in December. I know in 2013, because I happen to have a packet, I don't know about 14, but I know we did not in 15 and 16. How hard is it to get that year-end data presented at our December board meeting?
It's not, and the reason that 2 years ago we chose not to do that is that there's such a stark difference from what you would see at that December meeting than what you will see in the March-April CAFR. There would be two glaringly different documents. Here we could show that we were right on budget, and by the time we closed all the books, we finished our audit, we actually overspent. So it would be like a shock factor. However, if the desire is to have an unaudited report in December with unaudited, like in real big letters above the report, that's totally doable.
What are the factors typically that change substantially?
One is the FRS requirement.
Okay, so that was new that we did last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lagging accounts payable, or even some of our accounts receivables. Just the matter of the fact that we're in the middle of the audit, things are very fluid. So it would be, as a matter of fact, when we, as an example, without giving the numbers since they are totally mean nothing now, when we first had the opportunity to sit down and say, this is where we think we ended the year, the conversation that I had with Ms. Egan is totally different than the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. Meaning, at first look, it was much more pull out of fund balance than it will show in the CAFR.
Okay.
So there will be a swing just based on lots of nuances in closing out books and finalizing payments. So November, we would actually do the report. And in December, we can do it, but we just have to have it with some caveats that this does not truly represent the audited financials of the previous fiscal year.
Gotcha. Okay. Accounts receivables. Most of our income is fair and grants. What other large account receivable would contribute?
Pretty much it. From
Okay.
twinkling from tax collectors, from some fees. We still get, as a matter of fact, I believe in November of this year, we received payments for prior fiscal years, up to 5 prior fiscal years of tax collector. They do their audits as well, and there'll be some collections that never got sent to us. A small percentage or accumulation from yield from investments from the tax collector. We received one of those in November that changed the actual amount of tax collections coming in. It was small, but it's still going to change the bottom line.
Right. So I would think that probably more of your accounts payables
Yes.
is what goes back into the unaudited version. Okay. Very good, and I just want to state I'm fully happy with the presentation where we were. I think we were on the right track, putting in a 90-day balance fund, and I'm very happy with the results. Thank you for the presentation. We do have our work though, and let me just commend you all for initiating the zero-based budgeting, because I think that is really going to help us get a grasp on our expenses and kind of find out where maybe the waste duplication, if any, is, and that process certainly would identify it. So thank you.
Thank you, Director DeRoche. And I second your comments. I think bravo on the presentation. I think staff responded well. And one question we're going to just follow up on other board members. What effective ways can we just briefly? Would it be just maybe the chair of this committee at the next board meeting, just doing a very short briefing on what we learned, or what's the or sending them the presentation? What's the best way to make sure the other board members, if they haven't, maybe they've already been copied.
We'll bring a modified version forward to the full board. Our board's habit is not that the individual chairs come back and brief up to the board, but that information is received into the committee level, and that it's transmitted back up to board members either through the weekly or through a board packet.
Okay.
So if it's a recommendation of this committee, we can bring some level of update to the full board. One that would probably be mindful of their time, and also with the committee structures doing more of the heavy vetting.
If it would please the other committee members, I think some type of briefing would be good. I don't know if we need to vote on that or not, but any thoughts?
Okay.
Sound good?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
More information is always better.
Yes, definitely, especially Bravo information. So, all right, great. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, Jeff. All right, next, and just a quick update. We did skip over agenda item 1 in the hopes that Commissioner White may be on his way, but I think we're going to go ahead, before we get into the committee action items, go ahead and recall agenda item 1, election of the chair and vice chair. And with that, I will turn it over to our counsel, Mr. Smith.
Good morning. As you know, we do this from the floor. So what we will do first is accept nominations for the chair. Do I hear any nominations from the floor for the? Yes, sir, Mr. Jacob.
I'd like to nominate Director Melendez as the chair.
Okay, we have Director Melendez as a nomination.
Second.
Okay, are there any other nominations from the floor? Not hearing any, I think we just need a motion to approve Director Melendez as the chair.
I move that we approve Director Melendez as chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We have the continuation of the chair.
Thank you all for vote of confidence. Appreciate it.
And we will now open the floor for nominations for vice chair. Do I hear any nominations for vice chair? Ms. DeRoche.
I would like to nominate Director McLean.
Any other nominations from the floor for vice chair? Hearing none, the nominations are closed. Is there a motion to approve Director McLean as the vice chair for the committee?
I'll move to approve Director McLean for vice chair.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We have the new chair and vice chair, and I'll turn the gavel back over to the chair to complete the meeting. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you all. Appreciate that. Okay, next on the agenda is item number 3, committee action items. The first, I will turn it over to Ms. Egan.
And I will turn it over to Ms. Lee.
Good morning, Kenyatta Lee, Chief Administrative Officer. Action item 3A is to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award a contract to United Data Technologies for the Phase 2 wireless infrastructure on HART paratransit fleet, HART transfer centers, streetcar barn, and on the TICO line streetcars in an amount of $698,434, plus a 10% contingency of $69,843.50 for a total amount not to exceed of $768,278.45. And this particular project is basically a follow-up to our Phase 1, which was to have wireless on our actual bus fleet. So this will allow us to finish off that wireless infrastructure to ensure that we're ready for any emerging technologies that are available as a part of Phase 2.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lee. Appreciate the presentation. Is there any discussion on agenda item A? Okay, do I have a motion for approval?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, the ayes carried. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thank you. All right, I have my glasses on now so I can see who's presenting. I've moved to that level now. Agenda item B, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Seward. Oh, actually,
And
no.
now it's Mr. Campbell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Lucian Campillo,
Thank you, Lucian.
Senior Manager of the Project Management Office. Got two action items to bring to you this morning. The first one is to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to award contract VC 000624 for the 21st Avenue Stormwater System Assessment and Design to Land and Water Engineering Service Incorporated for the amount of $198,367.13, plus a 10% contingency of $19,836.71, for a total not to exceed amount of $218,203.84 for a 2-year period. Just to highlight what this is about, at 21st Avenue, it's got a major stormwater problem. I mean, the asphalt's failing. We're putting money into design and assessment. This way we know in the future what kind of grants we need to go after to make sure our stuff is still okay and safe for our buses and for our bus fleet. The great thing about this proposal that came from this company was they also offer assistance with grant writing, which specifically to this type of stormwater remediation. So this was the, like I said, once again, it's the assessment and design. And in the future, we'll do the remediation.
Thank you, Lucian. Are there any? Is there any discussion on this item? No. Okay. Yeah, I think most of us are aware of that issue there. Do you have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Second. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nay. Okay. The ayes carried. Thank you very much, Lucian. Appreciate the presentation.
And now the second action I'm going to bring to you.
Item C.
Item C, authorize the executive of execution of a memorandum of understanding, excuse me, I can't read this one, for the regional interjurisdictional mobility project between HART and PSTA, detailing the project participation, responsibilities, funding requirements, revenue, and cost-sharing methodologies to remain in effect for 2 years from system acceptance. So this is near and dear to my heart. This is the project that I'm the project manager of. It's the regional fare collection project, we like to call it also. What this finally does is it finally codifies what each of the agencies is going to do. You can expect another few more of these as we finish up with the other agencies, and just to make sure that HART is protected, and so is the interests of PSTA.
Okay. And just is there any discussion on this item?
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
have
Ms. Director
a
Durrett?
question. So how are we, I know it's in here, but maybe from your perspective, how are we allocating the cost of this amongst the two agencies? Is it based on ridership, or maybe you could give us a short summation?
That's a great question. Okay, so at the onset, the project itself, how we kind of use a methodology of how many vehicles are in the fleet of the agencies. So, example, there are 529 total. HART has 191 buses. PSTA's got 196. I'm just pulling their number from my head. We kind of base the allocation of design and actual real cost based upon those numbers. We kind of share that amongst the agencies to include the back office. So if the back office costs $100, 40% ours, 40% theirs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And will the other jurisdictions, such as Pasco and Manatee, be will we be doing a memo of understanding with them as well, or how do they come into the fold?
Yes, ma'am. What I originally, the strategy was to have one big memorandum, and that failed miserably. So I started going individually by counties and agencies, and it seems to be working a lot better.
Okay.
We just go through the bureaucracy of their different boards.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to just a quick comment, Lucian, that the level of detail that you all have provided specific to the memorandum, I think, is good. So thank you very much. So, and just to clarify, this if this is approved, this is not a recommendation to go to the board, but we will be approving this memorandum of understanding. Is that correct? Or will this go to the board?
You're recommending it to the board for full approval.
Full
Yes, sir.
approval. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, are there any other questions or comments or discussion? Okay. With that, is there a motion to approve item C?
I'm so moved.
Okay, second. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the ayes carried. All right, well, that is the last item on our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you all again for your vote of confidence. I appreciate it. Thank you.